Chapter 17 won't do too much in the way of review. We're just going to start at verse 7. But who are the main people or main ones being talked about in chapter 17? Remember?
The Antichrist.
What's that? The Antichrist is one of the people, which would be in the form of the beast. And so we're again talking about the beast. Who else are we talking about in 17? The prostitute, the woman. Okay? And there would be two others that are part of this. Yeah, he may fit in there, but he's not one of the main. Well, yeah, he does fit in, really, especially tonight. But who else, Betty? Okay, so the woman representing religion and government, the beast and all that, so we'll carry on that. But the other two, who's doing most of the talking in chapter 17? The angel. Which angel is it? One of the seven. All right, so we have the seven angels that poured out the last bowl there, and it just says that on the heels of that, we're ready for Armageddon to happen. It's set up, the Euphrates river's been dried up and all that kind of stuff. And then rather than boom, go right into that happening, it begins to discuss some things in 17 and 18, and then it's not until we get to 19 that they're actually happening. So it's not a pause, it's not an interlude, it's just doing some description and stuff. And one of these angels goes and begins to talk to who?
John.
Who's it? Who?
John.
All right, thank you. All right, so we got the angel talking to John about the prostitute and the Antichrist, or the beast, or whatever. So that's kind of the framework that we're working in. Chapter 17, verse 7 is where we'll start then, all right? Who'd like to read? Okay, Gene, you got verse 7.
Verse 7 of 7.
Sorry, thank you, verse 7.
Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns."
All right. So John apparently had this baffled look on his face as he's watching this unfold. And then all of a sudden he sees this image of this woman riding the beast, and these are not the first. This isn't introductory to the woman and beast, but he just sees this picture of the woman riding the beast, and apparently it says astounded. I don't know if any of your translations say anything besides why are you so astounded.
Marvel.
Was that?
Marvel.
Why do you marvel? Okay. Any other translations?
Why do you wonder?
Why do you wonder? Yeah. What's that confused look on your face? I don't know if anybody says confused, but it almost comes across as though he's kind of confused at what he's actually looking at. And so the angel comes and he says, let me explain, all right? Let me explain a few things. And so he basically outlines what we'll talk about through the rest of the chapter. And he says, let me tell you about the woman and about the mystery of the beast. The mystery of the woman and the mystery of the beast, which this should sound a little familiar. So, and it would, Paul has already been seeing some of these things, but apparently the woman riding the beast is part of what's, maybe it was the baffling part, not as much who it was. So the rest of chapter 17 is all about the explanation. All right, so the angel says, I'm going to explain. Let me talk to you about this mystery of who this woman is and the mystery of who the beast is, even though we're aware, and John was aware basically who it was, but he says, let me explain. So this is the rest of the chapter is an explanation. Kind of a long-winded explanation, kind of a detailed explanation in some ways, and yet it still leaves maybe a lot of questions still in our mind. So that's verse 7. Verse 8, we'd like to have. Oh wait, before we move to verse 8, all right, Donnie, I saw your hand first, so verse 8. Chapter 8 or what? Okay, verse 8, all right. But have y'all ever been confused? Do I ever get that look on my face? I kind of feel like sometimes the angel will come and say, Michael, why are you so baffled? Why the confused look? Well, I'm confused at the time, all right? So, well, let's get our explanation then of what this is all about.
Okay, the beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because It once was, now is not, and yet will come.
Let's talk in riddles. Can we talk in riddles? Or it's Sally sells seashells by the seashore. That's right, all right. That's kind of what that sounds like. So don't you love it when someone says, let me explain something to you, and then you just get more confused. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to explain this to him. Okay, but basically we can figure this out, all right? So he's then talking about the beast. All right, so your first fill in the blank is, as the angel begins to explain to John, he explains the beast. So we have the first two, the woman and the beast, but he starts talking about this beast. Beast equals, and this is not new to us, but maybe the wording, and I want to say it this way because it fits our understanding of the beast and how we're talking about the beast right now. Beast equals, anybody want to guess? Because it's not directly out of the scripture, it's not word for word or anything. Who is the beast? What is the beast? Okay, we can say Satan. Remember we talked about how this gets a little bit like we're talking about everything, the Antichrist, Satan, all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm looking for. Okay, that's one world government. Don't write that, but that would be just as appropriate.
That king is king.
Okay, that king of the kingdom and the last final thing and all that. Okay, so beast is referring here to worldwide government. One world government would work too, but worldwide government. And there's a distinction because we don't want to get an understanding or a thought that the beast is just talking about government as if government's bad. Where does the concept of government come from? Is that man-made or God-made? Interesting. How many of y'all say it's God-made and how many of y'all say man? How many say man-made? Okay, how many say God-made? So which is it? Who thinks they really know?
God made man.
Okay. All right. Yes, Angela.
Back in the day, the Israelites wanted a king. They wanted a ruler, so they wanted a government, which they didn't have. So that's why I think that God made the government, because He supplied them with what the people wanted. So the people wanted it.
In light of Israel, okay? Well, we know that most of the world, other than Israel, especially in all of the Old Testament times, were not godly. They weren't God-fearing or anything like that, and yet they had government, right? But does that necessarily mean that the idea of government is man's idea? Whose idea is authority? I'm working on this. We're talking out loud, all right? We're friends here, so. Whose idea is authority? God's idea, all right? So the idea of someone having authority over you, that comes directly from God, right? All right. Does the Bible give any indication, you don't have to tell me verse, chapter, verse, but does the Bible give any indication that God places people within the government framework? Okay, and so I see mostly yes, I agree. Is the indication that He only works within like Christian governments? Like Israel's government, like Angela was talking about. No. So when it talks about God using and placing and all this stuff with kings and governments and those in authority, that's whether they believe and trust in Him or not. In fact, God kind of says the only reason they have authority is because it's been given to them. And all right, so this is kind of that's why we have to kind of make sure that we're not just saying that like all government's evil and it's the beast, all right? Because the context here is in this worldwide government. And basically here what we're talking about, do away with all the idea of the authority and government system within the Jewish people and everything. Forget about that, set that aside. Really, when we're talking about anytime we're talking about worldwide government, we're talking about Gentile, non-believing government. We're talking about worldly government out in the world, and if it's world dominating, then it's a world government. All right. Who at the time that John is seeing this, and as the angel begins to talk about the beast, and he's referring to this beast, which is clearly the end-time government, who is currently in government 2,000 years ago when John saw this? Rome was Rome a worldwide government? Okay, so we're talking about a worldwide, was it a godly government? Okay, it's an imperial type system and everything. And so you have Rome. And so John would understand Rome, okay? But now when he's talking about the beast in the context of what John just saw, he saw the woman riding the beast and stuff, what government are we talking about then? It'd be the final government, right? So keep those in mind because we're going to keep working this until I think we understand this, but we're going to see it from a couple different angles that I hope will help explain this. Now, just about the time we get that figured out, I think, okay, I get it. The beast is the government, all right? It's a worldwide power, the worldwide government is what that's referring to. But then, as Donnie read, it starts talking about who was and now isn't, and who will come again, and all kind. Does that sound a little familiar? Who was and okay. Several times in Revelation, we've heard who was and is to come or whatever, right? And who's it referring to when it talks about that? Okay, that's referring to God or talking about Jesus. Jesus was, He is, and He will be. He's the eternal. He's the eternal God. Jesus is eternal as well. And so that kind of a reference rings in our mind as referring to God. Now this is different because it may sound like that, but that's not what it said at all, was it? It said this beast was, and then he says now isn't, is not, now is not. So God never doesn't exist, right? God always exists. So God is never not, but he talks about this beast in terms of he's not, but then he'll come again. So that's peculiar. So fill in your blank. The beast was, now is not, and will come again. Interesting. So we got the woman on the beast, and this beast is the worldwide government, but it was, it is not currently, and yet will come again. And when we think about this end-time government, kind of where does it come from? Where does it stem from? All right? And it says, read it again, at the end, it's a long verse, okay? But it says, this beast that you saw once was, now is not, and will come again. And where is it coming from? Up out of the abyss. Someone flip back to chapter 13, Revelation 13:1. 13:1. And if you read that whole chapter, we'll refer to it a little bit more. But how does that chapter begin? You got it?
Yeah. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea.
I saw a beast coming out of the sea, all right? So out of the depths, out of the abyss. However, the sea is usually a reference to the sea of people. Okay, so out of the sea of people. So anyways, but this beast is some we've been talking about, all right? And not only does it say that the beast will come out of the abyss, but he's going to, the one that was, now is not, and is coming again out of the abyss, he or it. What is or it may even not even refer. I can't remember which translation. I think it's the NIV says he. And it just goes right, and will go to his destruction. All right. So who is going to be sent to his destruction?
This monster.
What's that?
This monster.
The monster. And who is the monster? Because it says he, not it. Satan. All right. We think about Satan being thrown into the bottomless pit. Is that what's going to happen? You've heard that? That's not news, right? It's not news to him either. I don't think he believes it, but he knows that's what it says, that he's ultimately going to be thrown into the bottomless pit. And so this one who comes, now I hope you get a little confused because it is a little bit confusing. It's like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the government or are we talking about the leader of the government? All right? When you have a dictatorship style government, is it a little hard to separate the government from the dictator? It is, isn't it? So in that form of government, in the kind of government that's to come, it is really hard sometimes to distinguish this one world government, this system, and the leader of that system, which is the Antichrist in particular, because we're past this point when John sees this, that the references now to the beast are talking about the Antichrist that has been possessed by the devil, the dragon. So you have a reference to the dragon thrown down. So So it is all wrapped together. So we don't want to lose the idea that it's one world government, but we also know that the leader is a he, in both terms, the Antichrist, this man right here, and then he, the devil, who comes and possesses that man. All right? Keep that in your mind, because we're going to keep working through that kind of stuff. All right? So in the way of introducing your talk, I'm going to explain these things to you. I'm going to explain about the beast, all right, that is being ridden. This beast has a history. It isn't now, but it will come again. Also, it will be going to destruction. And then begins to talk about, and I put on your paper, I put nameless earth dwellers. Why would I call them nameless earth dwellers? Do they really not have names?
The names were in the book of life.
They do have names, but their names are not written in the book of life. So at the same time, the angel explains to John about the beast as the government. He hones in on the fact that he's really pointing out the devil, the Antichrist, the leader of this one world government, but then talks about all the people whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life. Why would he be talking about them? Why bring them up?
The ones left behind?
They are, yes, they're left behind. They come from the ones that were left behind.
And the ones that will bring the beast power.
Ah, okay, that's good. They not only come to bring the power, not the physical power and authority, but they give allegiance to him, right? They worship him. So there's power in that. When you have a dictator and people worship that dictator, then he's got the power of the people coming back. And so the reference to them not having their name written in the Lamb's book of life further distinguishes who we're talking about. We're not just talking about people left behind. We're talking about people from this point who have pledged their allegiance, so they are marked. What are they marked with? Mark of the beast, which is?
3 6s.
666, which is? The number of man, 666, all right? So they've got the mark, and he's talking about them. So he talks about the beast, and remember that who that allegiance to is to the leader of the one world government, because the Antichrist has already, when he indwells the devil, when he indwells the Antichrist, he turns all that religious focus back on to him. All right? Yes.
That is the thousands and thousands of people that are coming.
Oh, yeah, we got
Troy,
Yeah.
Jerusalem.
Exactly. We've got all the people that are gathering, and it's those people that are gathering that worship the beast and all that, and that is exactly who it's describing. And so Satan and his followers, you can almost say it that way in a simpler term, all right? So with the earth dwellers, it's the people on earth that have pledged their allegiance to the Antichrist, to the devil, all right?
Is that the word that goes in there, where it says, he will go to his destruction?
Yes.
Leave blank?
The devil will be thrown into the bottomless pit. You can put Satan or whoever, but yeah. And you can say the Antichrist as well. So whichever term, but the best way to see that, we want to really get to the bottom of this, and that is that it's referring, when it says he will go to his destruction, you're talking about the devil in particular. All right. Will this one world government come to an end as well? Yeah. But the government as a system or a structure doesn't need to be cast into hell. That's just the people that have that form of government. So that's why we recognize it as a government, but we also recognize the leader of that government, and he will go into destruction. And guess who goes with him? Who? All the people, the devil, the Antichrist, someone mentioned the false prophet, and what? The demonic forces, yeah. So follow the leader. Yeah, they're going to follow him right to destruction, where their eternal judgment lies. All right. Then we go on to verse 9. What's 9? All right, you got it, Wanda?
This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads or 7 hills, verse 11 says.
All right. Let me back up, all right, because there's one thing I wanted to point out that I didn't, and I didn't put it on your paper either, but let's go back to the verse Wanda read in just a second. There's a term in there that says that these earth dwellers, they were astonished as well. So we have John being astonished, and he said, why are you so marveled? Why are you marveling? Well, what are you so astonished about? The earth dwellers are astonished as well. And what were they astonished about? Nope. No. It says, the inhabitants of the earth, whose names were not written in the Lamb's book of life from the creation of the earth, will be astonished when they see what? The beast. And why? Because they'll say, this beast once was, now is not, and yet he will come. And so it's like
Antichrist come to life.
yeah, we can't believe what we're seeing with our own eyes. Is this is the one who once was and then wasn't and now is. Now that could be a reference to that was. I'm not saying it is, but some understand that to be a reference to the Antichrist who was killed, and then the devil possessed him, and he came back to life, and that was a miracle that took place, which mimics the resurrection of Christ. All right, and so almost like he was alive, and then he died, and he came alive again. That makes perfectly good sense. I don't believe that's what the reference is here, but I can't prove that it's not either. All right, but that astonished people. That's what led to one of the biggest parts of worshiping him. He came back from the dead. Well, voila, we worship the real one that came back from the dead, and will live forevermore. Not so with the devil. All right, so that we got that. So then, I'm sorry, Wanda, you read your verse there, and it's pretty short, but in verse 9, is that verse 9? Yeah. Verse 9, he tells us to use our brains. Okay, that's hard for me today. My brain is like shut down on me, all right? So come on, use your brain, use your mind, all right? I started putting some brain teaser. So far, it seems to me like it is a pretty good brain teaser. But he says use your mind. This is something you have to really kind of think through this process. So again, once again, even though he's explaining things to us, he's making us think about this. So he explains a little further, all right? This calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads, because the beast that the woman is riding has 7 heads and has, well, it just refers to the 7 heads. We're going to get more detailed here, all right? Has 7 heads, and he says the 7 heads are what? 7 hills, all right. 7 heads are 7 hills. So it's time to use your brain. The 7 heads are the 7 hills. We don't have to use our brain to hear that. However, don't think hill, think mountain. Now, see, that's where our mind goes. But don't think that too fast, all right? Because most of what I've studied say that's misleading, or that can get a little confusing. That sometimes we automatically think. Why would we think Rome when we think 7 hills? What's that?
Sits on 7 hills.
Okay, Rome sits on 7 hills. Now, I put this in there because I've heard that, I've never actually seen the names of the 7 hills. And I found that. You want to know how I found it? Siri. What are the 7 hills with Rome, whatever? And Siri told me, so this comes straight from Siri. Thank you, Siri. All right. So, I named them there because, we think about that, about Rome sitting on 7 hills, all right? So I'm not going to try to pronounce those hills, but he gives the names of all 7 of those hills. There's some other hills, and the Vatican sits on a hill as well. It's not named among the 7. And so that, I've heard that taught in that explanation. This is a reference then to Rome, and what would come out of Rome? We've got the government, the Roman Empire. What else is significant of Rome? What's that? Well, not the 7 kings. I mean, if it does in this, but when we think about Rome, we think of the Roman, we think of the Vatican. So, yeah, Catholicism and that. So automatically you start going right there with religion and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying there's not some of that tied into here, but this is not really what from those that I'm studying believe that the hills is a reference to mountains, not hills, but it's really a biblical symbol of kingdoms. So how you said a minute ago, the kings. So it's more that sits on 7 kingdoms or 7 kings, which we'll see continue to pan out that idea. And so if in fact, it's not talking about the Vatican and Rome's sitting on 7 hills there, and the 7 hills then are kingdoms, then what, and we're going to describe that a lot more in just a minute, because the verses keep trying to get us to understand this. What does it mean, or what do you think it means then that the woman sits on the beast that is on, that has 7 heads, that is on 7 hills?
Well, the woman was always referred to as Israel.
Well, Israel's referred to as a woman. That's the woman in shrouded in light and all that kind of stuff. That's not this woman. This woman is still talking about the prostitute, which is what?
The head of the government.
No.
One world government, isn't it?
No, the beast is one world government, and the woman is one world, well, there's one word church, yeah, one world religion, which is the false prophet, all right? Now, this is the prostitute of the one world religious system, all right? What's that? Yeah, not only the prostitute, but the mother of prostitute, which means not only does she prostitute herself spiritually, religiously with this end-time government, with the false prophet, but also spawns others. So false religions, idol worship, all kinds of perverse kind of things that go along with that. So yes, Angela.
Well, it makes sense if you think about it as her being with a, not necessarily church, but with the religion, because she has planted seeds inside of the mind of the church that have drawn her away from Christ, which makes her prostituting the church.
Of course, the church is in heaven, but
Right,
but the
people
religious
don't
people,
realize.
right. And now we have to also remember the difference in time right now, because when we think of people that and religion of people, okay, during this time, all that's left other than Israel, pretty much what we've got left are those whose name are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So those that are falling into this thing, along with the prostitute, the false prophet, and the Antichrist, are people who worship the devil. All right. So we're not talking about maybe the idea of someone that's Buddhist today or Hindu or some. I mean, the world religions tie into that ultimately, but it's different when the people. This becomes a melting pot. It's one world, so it's no longer all these separate things, but its expression goes out different.
Don't you think, though, that they don't realize that they're worshiping the devil?
Well, they know, because they pledged, they recognized him, and he said, you worship me or else. And so, yeah, we worship you, and they get the mark, 666.
But do they realize that it's actually Satan that they've chosen to worship, or do they just think?
I think when they're following the Antichrist up front here, they're not totally aware that he is in the devil's
By that time.
hand, right? Because even Israel didn't recognize that at first. But by this point, yes, they do.
Nobody be
They are
saved
fully
at
aware.
this point on, nobody is.
There's not much indication that anybody's become saved as in become a Christian or something
They
at
know if
this
they
point.
don't follow him, they're dead anyway.
Right.
They get no food, they
Yeah.
get no medical
Yeah,
help.
you follow me or else I'll follow
At
you.
this point, God has already delivered majority of his wrath.
Yeah, and we're at the end of the end of the end anyways, and so we're not in this journey to process. Yeah, they know how this is coming down. So let me, I found it interesting. One of the things that steers us away from the idea of the 7 hills that are in Rome, even though we are talking about the Roman Empire, and even though we can talk about some religious things there and stuff like that, the woman rides the beast, doesn't ride the heads. She's not on the heads of the beast. The beast that she's on has 7 heads, all right? So the 7 hills are mentioned, but the 7 heads are mentioned, and so that makes a lot more sense thinking about the 7 heads, and then we find out who the 7 heads are in the next verse. So verse 10. Okay, the fill in the blank. Okay, I left that a little bit. Okay, the mountains are a biblical symbol for kingdoms, all right? So we get away from the Roman hills idea and more thinking about the kingdoms, which we see the 7 kings. But what the idea that the woman sits, we didn't really talk that out. The woman sits on the beast.
There's 7 continents in the world also.
Yep, but it had nothing to do with geography, and that's one thing that I kept coming and say, don't worry about geography, think about government, all right? Coincidence, I don't know, whatever. So the woman sits on the beast. She rides the beast. She goes along with the beast.
She's the ruler?
No, she's a prostitute with religion. Who is her focus would be the false prophet who leads the world religion. But we're going to see something really weird happen here in a minute. But she's on the coattails of the false prophet remember, it's the false prophet that tells everybody, you worship him. He sets himself up, he is God. Forget religion in any other form. Now it's one focus of our religion. Who's the beast? They lead, but they lead the government. So it's religion prostituted, tied in with government. We throw a phrase around that, not in this context, but it's not that far removed either. Separation of
Church and state.
church and state.
Religious
Okay?
leader.
What's that?
Religious leader.
Yeah. This gets interesting. We could have a whole side discussion we wouldn't get done tonight, but think about it, all right? Are we for or against separation of church and state? For separation of church and state, all right? So that means, correct me, that means that we as a church should have nothing to do with government because we've got to keep it separate. So government should be completely non-Christian or anything because that's government and this is church. So church ought to be church and government. That's not what it means?
No.
Exactly. All right. So if separation of church and state is what we believe in, and yet we don't mean that it means separate, so what does separation of church and state mean?
Means that the government doesn't
Means
control the
government.
church.
All right. So it means the government is not in charge of the religion. All right? We can be involved. It's not just like we get it this way, but you can't have it that way. That's not the idea. We should be involved in the political process. We should care about our government. We should want Christian government officials and leaders. However, we don't want any government, Christian or non-Christian, to turn around and tell the church, Christianity, the church, what we can and cannot do, or how we have to worship, or tell us, that kind of stuff. That's what's happening here. There's a total connection with church and state. It is. The church is the state is the church. It's just all mixed together. So the woman who prostitutes with the religion is riding on the coattails or riding this government, this beast. And so she's with it, all right? And this is going to change, but
I can't remember the time in history that it happened, but the church actually ran the government at one time. I don't remember what time in history it was. I remember studying it, that what the leader of the church said. He told the leader of the government what to do.
yeah, go on history buffs. Where are some good examples of that?
And I know it was overseas, it was England, but I don't know what time in history
Wrong.
this all
Okay,
happened.
and you needn't get in with Catholicism and stuff like that, not against Catholicism, but the idea that it gets mixed up, and who's in charge, and are these political leaders or religious leaders? And it gets real confusing. And so when religious leaders become political, with a political mindset instead of religion, it just gets complicated, it gets bad. So that's in a more, not a perfect world, but in the world as it is now. Not so there. There's no middle ground. It's all the beast. Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Christ expects every president or every king that we select has to be Christian.
Okay. Well, and see, that's where I wanted to kind of fool around with that idea, because the Bible teaches us that blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Okay, so we're blessed if we recognize as a nation that God is God. So the idea that we have, the idea that we have in God we trust, one nation under God, those kind of things, that's a good thing.
Those that
All
bless
right.
Israel will be blessed. Any
Yeah.
president that we have that has backed Israel or supported
blessing.
Israel wasn't necessarily.
Because of recognition of who God says Israel is. Exactly. All right.
The progressives in this day and age are trying to remove God from the schools,
Right.
from government, from everything, literally.
And not to protect religion, but to protect government,
Right.
basically. And so, while Christians, we're not trying to infiltrate, we're not trying to, say it has to be a Christian government kind of stuff, but we have influence there because we understand things from God's perspective. So it ought to mingle in that. That's where we live our lives. All right, but we also understand that not everybody are Christians. And so it doesn't have to be a Christian government for us to be a Christian nation and in God we trust and those kind of things, because it comes down to the people.
So
All right?
what is that state there?
All right, she wants the answer. Woman wants the answer, all right? I put religion, that's the prostitute, even though it's a false one. Religion riding the back of government, on the back of government.
Religion or the beast.
Yeah, religion riding on the government, or the back of the government, or the beast. So it's that mixture of religion and the beast. But remember that the false prophet is the leader of the one world government, not this prostitute. And yet she's riding on there. That's where it's going to get interesting in a minute, all right, if we get there. So let's move on then to this verse 10. Did we get there? We haven't read that yet. Wanda read that. No, we didn't. Okay. Who wants verse 10? Keep me moving. All right, Angela?
And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
All right, talking riddles again, but we can do this, all right? It's like he's telling them without telling them. It's explaining some things without explaining it in terms maybe I wish he would have or would. But he says this beast that is being ridden, so now let's set the religion, the prostitute aside for a second and not think about that. But the beast that has 7 heads, he explains these 7 heads are 7 kings. So he referred to the 7 hills, but now he says these seven heads are 7 kings. Then he says 5 are fallen, 1 is, and then 5 have fallen, 1 is, and then the one that comes, then he comes shortly, is the way I put it. That's not the way Scripture put it. What is that talking about? 5 have fallen. What are 5 have fallen? Is that talking about 5 kings that got killed in the days of the tribulation? No. 1 is, any idea what the 1 is?
The Antichrist.
No, yes, so. But it involves the Antichrist, but it's not him. It's well, yeah, it does. I shouldn't say it's not. It's his kingdom, it's his empire, exactly. So if the one that is the Antichrist or the one world government at the end, then what are the 5 that have fallen? Okay, let's do our history lesson. Okay, you need to know these. Number 1, see all your blanks right there? What was the first worldwide empire with a king? Nope. Egyptians. Yeah, Egypt was the first worldwide power with the Pharaoh as king and all that kind of stuff, all right? So the first world dominating power, first king, if you want to look at it that way, was Egypt. The second king?
Syria.
No.
Syria.
Assyria. Assyria, but Assyria. Number 2 is Assyria. Did Israel was Israel taken into captivity by Assyria? Yes, they were. One of the divided kingdom, northern or south. I can't ever keep it straight. I think the northern kingdom was taken by Assyria. And then the southern kingdom was taken by Babylon, which is number 3. Okay? So, Egypt, king number 1. King number 2 would be Assyria. King number 3, or kingdom number 3, these 7 kings, would be Babylon. Then 4, Medo-Persia. Medo-Persia. That government, it was the Medes and the Persians come together and they formed this world dominating power, overthrew Babylon, and never thought they'd be overthrown and all that. They lasted as long as they lasted, and then what was number 5? World empire. Greece. All right. Greece then was number 5.
So those are the 5 that have fallen.
Those are the 5 that have fallen. When it said 5 have fallen, it talks about Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, and Medo-Persian empires have fallen, and Greece have fallen. And then it says, and 1 is. All right? So at the time the revelation was given, 2,000 years ago, that Rome was, all right? It was Rome. So number 6 is Rome. That's the 6th world power. And what is this? And so it says, ready to begin, the 7 are kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has yet to come. What is the other that has to come? It's this guy, and what's the name of his world power?
Hell.
Yeah.
Put this, but then we'll have to explain this, especially if you look back at your note, all right? If number 6 is Rome, number 7 is Rome. 6 is Rome, 7 is Rome. All right? 6 is Rome, 7 is Rome. Why? Because the last world empire is the revived Roman Empire. It was, it is not, and yet it is to come. Right? For 2,000 years. There hasn't been a world power, a king of the world, since the Roman Empire, since the time of Christ. What's that?
The whole verse was a trick.
It was a trick, yeah. It's like, why did that happen? Okay, why did you say it that way, all right? But the one to come is Rome. So you've also got the one who comes as, remember, we're trying to separate but keep together the leaders versus the government itself or whatever. So when it talks about the 7 kings, the 7th is Rome. That's going to get a little trickier there, as if we can't just leave well enough alone. All right? I put underneath that the 7th king, it says, will not reign for very long. That's why I put, then comes Shorty. Okay? Shorty comes along. All right? Wait till he finds out Brother Mike called him Shorty, all right? So, fight with the devil here, all right? So why? Why does he not reign for long?
Jesus must come back.
All right. For one, he just started, at this point in time, he just started 7 years ago, and he's coming, and we know the end of the story. 7 years is not much of a worldwide reign, is it? Especially when this is kind of a wiggly one right up here, all right? It really doesn't become a world-dominating government until midpoint, all right? And so just about the time he gets the tattoos on everybody, they're not tattoos, but microchips or whatever happens, about the time he gets everybody marked, his time's up. Ding, 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 time's over, all right? And then you said because Jesus comes. And Jesus comes as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he puts a stop to this monkey business, all right? All right. Now, if that's not tricky enough, look at verse 11. Someone read 11. Who wants 11? All right. You got it, Sheila?
The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7th and is going to his destruction.
Oh man, what is that talking about? Now there's an 8th king. Is this a whole nother world empire or what? I'm so confused, all right? So fill in the blank here, and I'll let you even the thing. The 8th king, fill in the blank, the 8th king belongs to who? The 7th king, all right? And by the way, where are they headed? They're headed, I put it here because I didn't have much space, so I just said they're going to hell. So if you want to fill in the blank real quick, destruction is a nicer way, well, it's still not nice to say it that way. That is 13:18. Someone go back and read 13:18. I think Rita's going to get there real quick. Who's got it? Verse 18, 13a. Okay, you got it. Carla?
Make sure I got it. Okay, yeah. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666.
All right. And so remember, that's what happens right here when this final king takes place. But really, where did that begin? Begin with him. So the seventh king or leader is that man, the Antichrist. But get this, when he begins his reign, he really is just stepping into, he takes over the idea of what Rome once was and takes that and makes it his own. He makes it the final one world government. That stuff is in the making right now, has been for a while. That's not like a new idea that comes along. It's not like communism or something, all of a sudden, oh, here's a new form of government or a new way or something like that. This is just that Roman Empire revived. And all that stuff is in the making, has been for years. So when he steps in here as the seventh and final king, really, he leads that last kingdom, which is the one world government. However, along comes number 8, which is still part of this. He belongs to 7, and that is the devil. All right? The devil then takes over the 7th king and becomes the 8th king, because this government, led by a man, is a whole lot different when it's this government led by the man possessed by the devil, along with the false prophet, which takes religion as a let's tolerate, kind of work together and just bring everything under one religious title, to all of a sudden forget about all religious expression except to worship him, the devil. Wow. Okay.
Had he not, had he just done it all at once,
Yeah.
I think what would have happened?
Yeah, the dynamics work. I mean, you can see how it plays out. It's on this fast. It's 7 years, so all this take place, 3.5 really, to go from here to what this was, and then the big change that happened there. So that's where we get the 8th belong to the 7th. There's not 8 kingdoms. We're the same, but really, if you call the 7th, that's why I said we'll put Rome. But if you call the 7th king or the kingdom or the 7th one, if you call that Rome or revived Roman Empire, you could almost call this 8th king. He is in lead. This is a satanic kingdom. This may have started as the Roman Empire revived. The Roman Empire wasn't all good, but it wasn't all bad 2,000 years ago, okay? But it dominated the world, all right? It was overthrown, and nobody replaced it as a world-dominating power. We're a superpower, but we're not a world power, are we? We don't control the world, dominate the world. But when it happens right here, it becomes a satanic government, a satanic beast. The one world religion, or the one world government, becomes just that. It's a satanic thing. All right, going to bed. We don't have much to break down, but let's go ahead and we're getting this discussion as the angel is explaining this to John. Verse 12, because we go from the number 7 to the number 10. Who wants verse 12? Okay, you got it.
The 10 horns you saw are the 10 kings who have not just yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast.
All right, so we see the woman riding the beast. We clarify that the beast has 7 heads. He explains what the 7 heads are, but then he also says, you notice that the beast also had 10 horns. All right, and so the angel explains the 10 horns are 10 kings. We just talked about 7 kings. Well, those kings were the kings of the worldwide empires. The 5 that had fallen, the Roman that was, it would be done away with, but there'd be a final one that was yet to come. And at that point, it has come. All right, but the 10 horns are not down through history. The 10 horns are 10 kings that, at the time of this final satanic worldwide government, they are given authority. It's the world divided into 7 regions. And they are given authority within their region by the Antichrist, by the devil himself, gives them authority to rule in their area. And it says for 1 hour. Do you think we're walking like from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock? No. Okay. So that's a reference that, like, it's a reference to a short period of time. Is really. So for a short period of time, they're given some authority because they don't have a kingdom. The 10 toes do not represent 10 other kingdoms. It's 10 other leaders or kings. So it is the leaders appointed by the Antichrist, which correspond now. Now we can go back, way back to Daniel. These are the same 10 that correspond with Daniel's 7 horns that he describes in Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 8. As he prophesied and looked towards the end time world, he saw this. If you remember that statue, the statue of the man, gold head, silver, bronze, clay, clay, what are the legs?
Feet of clay.
Is that iron legs with the feet of clay? Feet have 10 toes, right? So it also corresponds to the 10 toes of Daniel chapter 2. All right? And what happens to the 10 toes and those feet made with clay? Clay's not very strong. It's certainly not quite as strong as gold or silver or bronze. They get crushed. What do they get crushed by? A rock, and who is the rock?
Christ.
Jesus is a rock and he rolls my sins away. All right, so he crushes. So Jesus comes, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. This is all pictures of what happens at Armageddon. King of Kings comes, he crushes these 10 kings. You said it earlier, where are the 10 kings at this time? They're fit for battle. They are in the valley near the hill of Megiddo, and they are ready to do their business. And they get crushed by the rock, all right? So this is all description of what's really taking place at the time of Armageddon. Verse 13.
They have one
Kathy's got
purpose.
it. Go ahead, Gene, you can get the next one, all right, Kathy.
These
Okay.
are one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast.
All right, they are of one mind. 13 kings over the entire globe. They're one solid, there's unity there. Their one solid purpose is to give allegiance or to worship, not just worship, that's the religious part of it, but as kings, as political leaders, as military leaders, they are to give their authority to the beast. And who is the beast? The final world government, but they are the government divided up, but they're really then focused on the devil himself. And so they're giving their allegiance. They all have that Mark 666. They're all gathered to do war, and we see that in verse 14. Gene, go ahead and read verse 14.
They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers.
All right. So this is describing then these 10 kings that are given authority for a short time. The final king, the devil, the Antichrist, and the devil himself come back for such a short stay. They're given not years, not months, but an hour, not really just an hour, but for just a short temporary authority they're given, and they use all that to gather the troops along with the frogs, all right? Frogs gather them all together, and they end up there in Megiddo, and they're all ready to do war against who? The Lamb. All right, who is the Lamb? Christ is the Lamb, all right? And to do battle with those who are with him. Who's going to be with the Lamb?
We are.
on that day? Raise your hand if you can be with the Lamb, all right. All right, you know why? Because the Lamb was in heaven, and he says, I got to go to earth and take care of some important business. And we all say, we're going with you. I ain't staying behind. None of us are staying behind. So those that are with him will come with him. So when they are ready to do war against the Lamb, it's going to be the Lamb. Now, we don't forget about Israel. They hate Israel. They're going to do Israel in. That's why they're gathering in that location. But the real beef is not just with Israel. It's the God of Israel. It's Christ, their Messiah. And he's going to do battle, and he comes against the Lamb and all those who are with him. For that reference, 1 Peter 2:9. Who's got that? Okay, you got it, Donnie?
You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. You may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light.
All right, so you are a chosen people. So when it says, and those that are with are chosen, faithful, his followers, that's us, the church that is with Christ and come with him. Angela.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Bring us
Can I
back.
ask a question? Okay, they have gathered there after Israel. They're going in search of Israel to get rid of Israel because they're angry with them.
They're done. Yeah, it's over.
And so the kings are following the government, thinking they're going after Israel. The government actually realizes that Christ is who they're actually going after?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's headed by the Antichrist.
Yeah, and not just the Antichrist, but by Satan. This is Satan's
Well,
doing.
Antichrist, Satan.
He's
Yeah,
Right.
kind of the same.
Remember everything the devil was about when Christ came the first time?
What's he
Got to
doing?
get this stopped. Got to get this stopped. And whatever. Oh, he did get warned. I got to get it stopped. I got to kill the baby, the children. Got to get it stopped. Finally, he got it stopped at the cross. Oops, that didn't work either. All right, he's always been about trying to do away with Christ because he's our only hope. He's the salvation. Don?
I read that sheet you gave us last week on Armageddon.
Uh-huh.
And I read part of it that I've never run across before. I'm not sure I agree with it. About the nations are gathered to fight each other.
Yeah, I saw the reference there. I'm going, oh, okay. I think, and it's worth researching, is that part of it is, and think about this, though they have this single purpose, I mean, they pledge their allegiance to the devil and stuff like that, the Antichrist, they got the mark and all that kind of stuff. But what does authority do to you? I mean,
Corruption.
yeah, corruption. When you've got a bunch of gangs, and we've all been in gangs and from time to time, the Crips over here, the Bloods and all that. But when you see gang fighting and stuff like that, do you see a bunch of really sincere, passionate people that love one another and they're with a common cause? I mean, it's dog eat dog. I mean, they'll turn on each other as well. In fact, you try to leave our thing and we'll kill you. That's what I hear anyways. That's why I never joined. I don't want to get killed. I'm trying to get out of it, all right? But you see where I'm going with that? We're not talking about nice people that just are misunderstood or that they just whatever. We're talking about people that are hungry for authority, people that are deluded so much that they would worship the devil and all that. So if there's any infighting, when I read that, I thought the same thing. I thought, well, we're just talking about this same thing. In the heat of the battle, when we're talking about evil versus evil, the devil doesn't love those that follow him. He despises everybody and everything. And so he's going to cause any kind of havoc that he can do. Are you following that at all?
Yeah, I do, but I don't see it being scripturally sound as far as anything in scripture is concerned.
Yeah, I was a little bit thrown by that. We'll do some more research. If you come across that, let's go ahead and wrestle with that. And there's a small reference, but it did just say that there's some ulterior motive. There's some self-seeking kind of thing is what I got out of that. So I don't know.
Well, when I think of the Antichrist sending the frogs out to bring people together, I think of them come together for one purpose.
Yeah, but they also were believing a lie, a delusion. They were led by demonic forces. And you look into the spirit realm and stuff, and you see demonic people and stuff. You're not talking about people that are really looking out for one another. They're sold out and they're in a bad place, physically, spiritually, in every way. And that's what these kings will be as well. So they're given authority. Anybody it's mutiny or whatever can happen. Someone's given authority, and instead of defending that, they say, I'll take over. We see that in the life of David, and all that happening to his family and stuff like that. They're supposed to be a family, and yet he's got a son trying to kill him, take over his kingship and all that kind of stuff. So you see that on steroids, on that where it's even worse. Yes?
If you look at the world today, in the different nations, there's always one nation trying to overthrow another one.
Right.
And when you have all of these real quick kings given authority, they really got an ego, and they're going to try to take anything and everything they can get.
And in countries that are in war right now, some of those, they have all this infighting. They have these factions that are trying to take over. You have it's not, it's one for all and all for one. It gets messed up. Okay, so anyways, but we know basically this battle's against God. It's against the Lamb, because it says it right there. And we're with him, and we know he comes and takes over. Verse 15, we can go through these last ones pretty quick. Give me just a few more minutes. Verse 15, what does it say about waters? Who's got that one? You got it, Marilyn?
And he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues.
Okay, just a reminder, once again, that even though we point out the Antichrist and the devil, we also think the one world government, but we also have to remember that this government came out from the sea of people, and it once again refers, when it says one world government, one world religion, we're talking about not just their leaders, but everybody in the world is all tied up, and it's prostituted, and it's mixed, and it's evil, and all that kind of stuff. And so the woman not only sits on the beast, but is also on the water, and the water represents the people. All right?
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, it's a pretty bizarre thought. But let's go on to verse 16. Who wants 16? You got it, one?
The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire.
Okay, things just got weird. Okay, now wait a minute. I thought we were all for one and one for all. I thought, wait a minute, I thought they're the beast, the religion, and the world are all tied in. Aha!
There's only one for all.
That's right, only one for all. Okay, so here's where we start really seeing the true nature of it. By this description, it says that the that the beast and these kings, which represent the one world government too, turn on the woman. Who is the woman? Not the one world religion, but the one who's prostituted herself against this, all right? And they turn on her, all right, and devour her. So this idea of religious expression, this idea of we're all here to sincerely worship the devil is what the false prophet leads everybody to do. And the woman says, oh, I'm in on that. And all of a sudden, she becomes the target and they destroy her. That's an interesting twist right there at the end. Now, I read one thing and I didn't get to pan it out, but what it says is at that point, and I couldn't find it in Scripture, but at that point, the woman is out of the picture, so that leaves who in the realm of religion? The one man, the false prophet. So whereas he leads all these religions together, and then he points all of them, that man, the false prophet, points everybody to worship the devil. The prostitute comes along and produces other prostitutes, daughters, whatever, and that spreads, but then it all turns and kind of implodes. And so it's left for the false prophet, because remember, he sticks it out to the end, because he gets thrown in the lake of fire with the man, the Antichrist. So this man, the Antichrist, separate from the devil, and that man, the false prophet, both get thrown into the fiery pit. All right, and then the devil gets chained up and locked up and all that stuff. Okay, let's go ahead. No more explanation. We're out of time. Verse 17. Got it. You know.
For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish His purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled.
I wish we had about 30 more minutes to talk about that one. Go home and think about that. God orchestrates all this. God does. So who's in charge? I thought the devil was in charge, or the Antichrist. I thought the false prophet. I thought the prostitutes. I thought the kings were in charge. 7 kings, 10 kings, the toes. Who's in charge? God's in charge.
The whole time.
And God puts it in their heart.
I don't care how many dogs are jumping.
Okay, yeah. God puts it in their heart. That's quite a twist right there, all right? All God has to do is say, you want it, have it. and God says, this accomplishes my purpose anyways. That took care of the prostitute, because they turned on him, all right? Angela, you had some? Verse 18?
Okay.
Finish this out, all right?
And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Okay, do you remember when we started 17? We said this is one of the hardest chapters to understand, because we had to understand that the woman in this chapter is not only referred to as a mother, but also a city. And while we've been talking about Rome and the Roman Empire and stuff like that, what city is she?
Babylon.
Babylon, all right? So in chapter 18, next week, we'll talk about Babylon, which you go back in that list of things, that was the third world empire, but we're not talking about just the world empire back there. We're talking about that evil, wicked Babylonian spirit system that is indicative of what this satanic thing is, all right? So the woman is also the city. There's that last one, and the city is Babylon. All right, let's be dismissed. Thank you for the 10 extra minutes. We covered a lot of territory, though. Chapter 17, 2 lessons, all right? Anybody thoroughly confused? Good. The 7th angel's going to come and clarify it to you tonight, all right? In riddles, all right? Let's pray. Father God, thank you again for this day. Thank you for blessing us, Lord. Lord, we have no idea what this week holds, but you do. We trust you, and we know, God, that you're working in our midst. We pray your blessings on each one that's here, your protection over your church. God, keep our eyes focused on you and the harvest and the job that we're to do, and all the distractions in life. God, we love you. We praise you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.